Hello and welcome. This is Heavy Business. I'm Aaliyah.
And I'm Curtis.
And today we have a returning guest, Natasha Gorey from RPM Promotions, right?
Correct. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. We got into some really interesting topics last time. We're going to dive in a little bit deeper this time, kind of in like less expected forms of press coverage, less traditional forms of press coverage. To start things off, though, we will talk a little bit about reviews, which is kind of what people think of first when they're like getting their PR, and reviews on blogs and magazines and things. So, Natasha, what are some things that bands should remember when it comes to reviews and what they should expect?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing I feel like artists in general need to remember that when we're talking about press coverage, especially things like reviews that take a lot of time listening to the album over, for the journalist in order to make sort of, to write that review, is that a lot of it has to do with timing. I feel like your timing is everything with PR. Because if you're coming in too late, a lot of the publications, because you also have to remember that the majority of music journalists and writers don't get paid. And if they do, it's not like they're on a payroll time, right? Unless we're talking about, your big newspapers and whatnot. So I feel like a lot of it has to come down to when you're pitching it. You can't pitch it last minute. It can't be a week before it's out. It's got to be pitched at least like a good month and a half. Um, and I feel like, to give writers that time and to give time in order to pitch it and to follow up and those kinds of things, because you got to remember the biggest thing that people aren't doing this as their full-time job. So I think that's number one. And number two, as well, is you've also got to remember that, it's subjective, right? Whatever is being written there is kind of the thoughts of what the writer and the journalist are, that's their opinion. And I feel like, you don't have to go on Twitter and then bash them for it if you don't like the review either. I feel like it all comes down to personal opinion. And, even if someone doesn't like it here, it doesn't mean they're not going to like it on this publication. And it doesn't mean your fans don't like it. I feel like, you know what I mean? It's very different depending on sort of what a journalist says to what fans think as well. So you always have to remember that it's subjective and not get too caught up on a negative review. And also another thing is if you do end up getting reviews, make sure you share them, because there's nothing worse than, a journalist putting a lot of time and a lot of work and a writer into something like that, and then it just doesn't get shared. Because I feel like that goes a long way when you're also putting that out there. Obviously, I know negative reviews, you might not want to share that, but the good ones, definitely share those to show your appreciation for the writer. I think those are some big things for that.
I want to add a couple things to that as well. Just as a backstory here, just for me on this. I personally used to always say people should share bad reviews or good reviews because all press is good press. I've changed my mind on that. I don't think they necessarily should share the bad reviews, like you said. I just want to publicly correct myself on this. Reason
It has
being,
been corrected.
it has
on
been
the record with
corrected
the Thunder
publicly
to match
with the
with the
Thunder, yes.
epicness.
But one thing I do also want to point out too, that I want to emphasize is when you're, especially if you're a newer band, even if it's a small publication, make sure you share it. Because some bands will be like, well, I don't really want to share unless it's like a name blog or a name magazine or whatever. But when you're starting out, all the reviews look good on your resume or whatever you want to call it, right? So if you share even the small blog stuff, it all adds up, makes you look good. This is all part of what PR is. PR is image. So we're trying to make you look good. So if you make it look like you have all these reviews, even if they're small at first, makes you look bigger, makes you look better. Sorry, I just had to jump in and say that.
No, you're 100%. I agree 100% on that. Even if it's small, share it, show your appreciation. It's a lot of work. Again, remember, they're usually doing this in their free time because they love music and they want to cover you. So absolutely, sharing it goes a long way, even if it's a small publication.
So I kind of feel like I want to bring something up here because I have seen artists recently lashing back at music journalists if their reviews were not only negative but seemed uneducated on the genre that they are playing.
Publicly, you talking or what?
Yeah, I'm talking publicly. You know
Okay.
who I'm talking about.
Do I? Okay, I'm blanking, but okay.
You know who I'm talking about.
I'm sure I do.
They actually made a YouTube video talking about how uneducated the people talking about their review, or the people who negatively and uneducatedly reviewed. Basically, they pulled quotes from the reviews explaining how these don't make sense as a critique of their genre. They basically, some of them were almost saying like, well, this should be less this genre, like, but that's what genre it is, so why is that a criticism of it? Like, so what do you think about that, like, idea of responding to batting back against journalism if it seems poorly done? And this, keep in mind, is a more well-known musician, I would say, not like not super underground person.
Right. So that one, I feel like it can get a little tricky because again, like coming back to my point that, a lot of the online blogs and that kind of stuff, like, necessarily they might not be journalists that went to school for music specifically. And it's a bit of a hard question because it's just like I understand it in the sense that, maybe you shouldn't cover a genre that you're completely out of the dark, but at the same time, it might also come down to somebody who loves all genres and love that bit of music, but at the same time, maybe doesn't have an in-depth understanding of that specific genre. I feel like in that sense, it could have been left alone because I feel like the more you share a publication like that, the more eyes it's going to get. I mean, there's a saying that, even online, if you're saying something bad that a million people don't like, there's still going to be 500,000 people out there that might agree and jump on the bandwagon, even if that's not your purpose, you're blasting it, but yet that's still going to grab attention of some people that think otherwise. So I feel like if you just kind of leave it alone, I feel like it might, especially if it's a smaller publication, most people might not pick it up. But if you're sharing it specifically, they're going to see it, especially if you're somewhat of a well-known musician. People are going to pick it up and they're going to read it. And also at the same time, I feel like, again, it's someone's opinion and maybe it's a mistake that they made, but I feel like everybody makes mistakes and everybody kind of might screw up a genre here or there. So I feel like there's no need to really make someone feel bad about that specific reason. But I also understand, if you're covering a specific genre, you should know a little bit about the genre. So, I mean, that's kind of a toss-up. I kind of feel like the band maybe could have emailed the editor quietly rather than blasting it on socials because now everybody sees it. I feel like that's just a better rule of thumb for anything. I feel like maybe just, giving a comment privately, to the editor or to the journalist, I feel like is a much better way to handle it. Rather than blasting it out publicly. Because again, everybody's going to see that bad review because you just put it on blast. So of course people are going to click it and be like, oh, they're curious now. So
I guess it just depends on how much you feel like you can clap back about stuff like that. Maybe it's just like the person's personality and they feel like they want to say something. And if they really want to say something, then I think that's like, I appreciated it, but also I don't think I would do that.
No, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that, if you're gonna, share a review that maybe necessarily don't like, I feel like maybe pointing out things is okay, but doing it in a specific way. Like, I feel like you don't have to be mean. Nobody has to be mean to anybody or anything like
Damn
that. I
it.
feel like,
But what if the review was mean to begin with?
well, that's true. That's true. I mean, that's hard because it's just like,
Because honestly, some journalists are super mean with
they are. Some
The
are.
low angry metal guy.
critiques.
Yes.
Not
Yes,
just
he is.
not just angry metal guy.
Angry metal guy.
know.
Well, he's got some writers that are pretty angry. He does.
Yes.
He does.
But
I
that's
feel
like that's like their brand. I mean, yeah, you can get upset about them being mean there, but that is their brand.
It's called
So
Angry Metal Guy.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But
I mean,
elsewhere, it's kind of like less expected. And it's like, oh,
I
are
feel
you
like
trying to be edgy? Okay.
exactly. And I think, yeah, like it's just all, again, it's opinion. And just because, you know, a certain person doesn't like it or a certain person thinks a certain thing, like it doesn't mean everybody else does. And I mean, I feel like music reviews don't deter me from buying music that I like. I mean, there's a lot of music
Same.
I buy that I know is not like amazing music, but I love it. You know what I mean? So it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
interject, I do want to point out that Ronnie Radke is probably the most vilified person in the music industry, and he
Yes.
sells what millions and millions and millions and millions,
Yep.
selling out stadiums and shit. So
Actually, it's funny that you mentioned Ronnie Radke because earlier when I had said about like, you know, when you're posting, you know, something, you know, a million people might disagree, but then 500,000, you just gain like 500,000 new fans. That was actually something I heard from a friend of Ronnie's because we had actually
ah,
talked about him a little bit.
mhm.
Because back in my day, I'm an emo kid, just so everybody knows, Escape the Fate, their first album is one of my favorites.
I knew you'd like this
Um,
topic. That's why I brought him up.
absolutely. But I mean, Ronnie, I feel like a lot of it's done on purpose. I don't think it's an excuse, but I do think he purposely gets people riled up. I know there are a lot of things that he has said that I personally don't agree with at all. But I do feel like people need to keep that in mind that he's purposely trying to get a rise because he knows even if a bunch of people don't agree, there's one or two people he just gained as fans. So that's the whole reason I think for the most part. I did see his interesting little rant he does. He likes to screenshot videos of Palais Royale and share them and like talk about them on Twitter. It's like a really weird thing. And then,
Mhm.
but anyway, that kind of stuff, I feel like he does go a little bit overboard. But I mean, I feel like Ronnie's just going to be Ronnie, and I mean, I'm not supporting it, you know. But yeah, I think you just got to keep that in mind.
Him and Chris Franzak are definitely against the normal rules on how to behave online, I think.
They
But
definitely are. They definitely
yeah,
are. And I mean, honestly, if it's any indication of sort of, you know, Ronnie's music, I feel like that's not too shocking. If
yeah,
you've ever listened to the lyrics,
yeah,
like especially
yeah,
the first album for Falling into Verse, you know, good girls, bad guys, you know,
yeah,
or bad guys, good girls,
yeah,
whatever, you know, anything
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Now that I've
Moving
taken us
on.
totally off topic with Ronnie Radke and Chris
No,
Franzak,
no, it was on topic. Stop saying that. It was on topic. We're moving on to the next
we're gonna get
topic.
Chris Franzak to do a shout out for us on that thing.
Off
What's it called?
topic.
Yeah, we're gonna do that
Let's
just for fun now.
You
move on
should.
to
You
talking
should. I
about.
love it.
I'm like, get back on track.
Nope,
I'm trying here. I'm trying
nope,
here, guys.
not
You're doing a
happening.
great job.
Nope, not happening. Anyways, sorry, Leah, go ahead.
Let's move on to talking about playlisting. Now, this is a topic I think it's kind of
Nobody likes
a
talking about.
yeah, it's kind of a tough one for musicians because it seems like the only playlists that really matter are the Spotify curated playlists. But do you have any insight on playlisting outside of Spotify curated playlists? And if you have any advice on how to get Spotify curated playlists too, I'm down to hear it. But first on
Absolutely.
non-Spotify.
Absolutely. So playlisting definitely is not my expertise, but I do know a little bit just from, you know, talking to different people and, you know, working at Looters where streaming was part of what we did, although I didn't handle that area, but I do remember a little bit. So one of the biggest things I think with non-editorial is most press publications have playlists, which is awesome. So sometimes even if you're coming in last minute, I know myself, sometimes I end up jumping on campaigns last minute a lot later than I hoped. But one of the things that can kind of alleviate the last minuteness or, you know, publications maybe not having time or they're bombarded with stuff is pitching for their playlist instead, because you might not always get an interview, but it's very easy to add a song to a playlist. So I feel like that kind of helps with a lot of coverage. And also on the other end, the more playlists you're added to, the better case it makes for the editorial playlisting. So if you have organic playlists like press playlisting, your friends are adding it to their playlist, you're adding it to your playlist, that helps kind of make your case to, Spotify and Apple to add to those editorial playlists. So I feel like there's a lot of playlists on the press end that people don't utilize, but they are really important, especially when it comes to the number of coverage you're getting. And I mean, you can always put on your one sheet that you were covered in this publication with the playlist as well. So, because it is a form of coverage, so it adds to that kind of that story, as Curtis had touched on before, about, you can say that, right? You can add that to your one sheet. So I feel like there's two reasons why you should definitely go for press playlisting. I feel like hit them up on that. I feel like a lot of big publications, like Pitchfork, Loudwire, NotFest, they all have playlisting, V13 Media. I could go on. There's a lot, Alt Press. So there's a lot of different playlists you could utilize on that end, as well as sort of getting, as many of your followers to add your music to their playlist the day of release, as well. So that encourage them to do that. I feel like that's a good tip as well to help with the editorial.
Smart. One question I have for you, Natasha, since you do more of a broad genre-wise than we do over here at C Squared, do you think that there's one type of music or style of music rather that seems to be easier to get coverage for, out of curiosity?
I do find that the alt rock is a little bit on the easier end in Canada specifically. And I say Canada because, as you guys know, especially Curtis living in Canada, the media landscape here is very different. And the mainstream media mainly covers a few specific genres. And you don't, unfortunately, have the support from the industry here on the underrated genres. Like, okay, not that metal's underrated, but it's kind of not as supported as other genres in Canada. So, your metal, your hard rock, your your electronic synth, your post-punk, all that kind of pop punk, emo, all that stuff doesn't get the recognition it does here, that it does elsewhere necessarily. So alt rock in Canada for sure. The mainstream seems to pick that up a lot easier. Any sort of alternative, anything that kind of has that cool kind of mainstream feel to it seems to do better. I find pop does not do so well at campus radio here, college radio. Campus kind of, because they cover sort of the more underground, they won't kind of push pop. But I feel like alt rock in Canada specifically, I do find though that metal fans and metal editors and writers are a lot more passionate about the music that they're covering. They do tend to cover it a little bit more often, which is fantastic. And you usually have them requesting interviews a lot, but that's sort of more the international publications as well. So it just depends, I feel like, which territory you're in. Really will kind of determine that.
Fair enough. What else do you want to cover on playlists? Is that it?
No, I mean, yeah, I think that's, I mean, I feel like that's good information to have, because I've looked at my band's statistics from like playlists that we've done through Submit Hub, or just in general, like I look at those playlists and how many plays we get from it. It's not that many. So it's like, it doesn't seem like it would make that much of a difference. But your point being that as many playlists as you can get on really is beneficial statistic to have. So
exactly, yeah. And I mean, I feel like the whole playlisting world is very interesting. But yeah, I do feel like the kind of going for that press playlisting does help you, because it's helped with discovery, number one, and helps make your case later, exactly what I had kind of mentioned. And yeah, so it's definitely good thing to utilize. Like, don't forget it, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think the whole like publications having playlists is another thing I didn't even really realize until it was too late. The album was already out, but maybe for the next cycle, we'll keep it in
Absolutely. I feel like go for it, because I mean, it's again, like time, if you're talking about time constraints, usually, if they can't fit an interview, they can't do a review or show coverage, they can usually put something on a playlist. So definitely helps on that end for sure.
Right on. So YouTube was the next topic, YouTube coverage. And I think sometimes this gets put on the back burner for like indie bands don't really think of it as much. Sometimes they do. When they do, and they reach out to people like YouTubers, sometimes the YouTubers are accommodating, and sometimes they make them pay like $300.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's important about the YouTube world, as I feel like YouTube is it's still such a discovery platform for bands. So can you speak a little bit on what you think about YouTube coverage for bands?
Absolutely. So I do think YouTube is a great like platform to utilize coverage on. So if you're talking about sort of the traditional kind of the YouTubers that do sort of the music reviews and the music interviews and that kind of thing, 100% they're incredibly beneficial. They grow a lot faster, and I find that they get a lot more eyeballs if they're cross promoted correctly, which a lot of the YouTube people that do that full time do have great numbers compared to necessarily, a online publication that might not have as many hits. But when we're talking about YouTubers that they might delve into music, but they also might focus on something else, like maybe it's movies, maybe it's Star Wars, maybe it's they really love the band Rush. I feel like a good kind of pointer is you always have to bridge it to what they focus on. So you have to find some sort of connection. For example, like right now, I'm pitching an artist who's heavily involved in gaming. His album comes out on Friday, but he is the whole album aesthetic has to do with gaming. So one of the things I'm pairing with, and mental health as well. So one of the things I'm pairing is gaming, music, mental health is kind of how I'm, going towards that. It's a bit of an escape on both ends, gaming, music, and they go hand in hand. So there's
I'm
always
interested
something.
already, Natasha. Tell us who it is afterwards, and maybe we can have them on.
For sure, absolutely, yeah.
I'm just interested now. I'm sorry, Aaliyah.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So basically, I've been kind of pitching these publications on, the escapism of gaming, right? Because gaming is an escape just as much as music is. I don't know about you guys, but music's always been my escape when things are, awry. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so kind of bridging those two things, I feel like is really interesting. It's a way people to escape. A lot of people do that via gaming, and a lot of people do that. It's all to do with mental health. So I feel like using that as sort of your anchor to then pitch that is a way to kind of gauge the interest. I think there was another one I had done a year ago. We were pitching based on there was a musician who loved Rush. So we were pitching on Rush's anniversary. I think it was a new beer they had come out with. So we were kind of trying to pair it that way, or there's even, Star Wars with the Obi-Wan Kenobi, Disney trying to, we had the musicians that were big Star Wars fans. So kind of trying to bridge it in that way. There's a new series coming out for Star Wars. So let's, base it on the series because this artist likes Star Wars and this YouTube channel covers Star Wars. So you can do a lot of different things with it. And I do feel like it's a cool platform to utilize, especially when we're talking about more of that lifestyle interest, because I feel like, a lot of the interviews are the same if we're talking about a release, right? It's about the album, who wrote it, those kinds of questions, which are great. But I feel like if you're a band that kind of has a fan base already, they probably know that. So to keep their interest into the interview is to get something that's a little bit more off the cuff, maybe a little bit on the fun end, which has to do with something completely different. Obviously, they still do address the music because that's the whole point we're doing this. But I feel like that helps the fans that you have as well keep interested. And it's a little bit fun for the artist as well because it's not the typical interview, right? So I feel like it kind of hits that in a couple different ways. And it's just interesting, to have an artist on, a Star Wars YouTube channel. I feel like it just kind of gives a little bit of an interesting element to it that you wouldn't see normally. So it kind of helps kind of get that pickup as well.
I love it.
Mhm.
All right. Moving on to podcasts.
Can we bring up one
like
more thing on
ours.
YouTube?
Oh, well,
YouTube?
hurry up
Yeah.
and
YouTube?
ask it, dude.
Well, it's not going to ask. I'm going to say something. That's not a question. It's
Okay,
a
well, say
statement.
it.
It's a statement. One thing I was going to point out about YouTube for the listeners here, a common question is how do you find YouTubers and how to reach out to them? So 2 tricks I found that seem to work. Well, obviously you can look for their email address under the check for the email address part under the about section, which is a big fat duh. A lot of people don't even think about. But usually as well, it's a little pro tip, which Natasha and Aaliyah probably will go like, yeah, that's obvious, but a lot of bands don't think it is. Find their Instagram and send them a DM. That's how you find them if you can't find an email address. Just wanted to give that pro tip there because it is so obvious, yet a lot of people don't even think about it.
Well, and so often we tell bands not to reach out to journalists via social media.
You shouldn't, but if you
But
cannot
this
find
is
a
different.
contact, if you
Yeah.
can't find a contact anywhere, I don't think that's a problem. Don't say pitch yourself. I'm saying like, hi,
Reach out
I'm
and
Joe.
ask for their email.
Yeah. Hi,
Mhm.
I'm not a journalist. I'm a PR, or hi, I'm a band. Can I send you my album, or pitch you? Can you give me your email address, type of thing? That's all I mean.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've done that myself a few times,
Do it all
with
the time.
publications you don't have contact. I do it all, yeah,
Yep.
I do it all the
Yep.
time. And that's a great way. I mean, usually 90% of the time you get a response and you get an email. So yeah, it is a good way to utilize. And definitely the about on YouTube. That's actually somewhere that I go if I can't find contact information on the website.
Yep.
I usually will, if they have a YouTube, I'll go on it just to see if there's an email there, even if I'm not looking for YouTube specifically. Sometimes
Same.
that's how I find contact.
Pro tips, everybody. Obvious, but pro tips. Nobody thinks of them. Not even joking.
Or the about on Facebook too. Sometimes that'll have, usually it's an info email, but sometimes you'll luck out.
Yeah. And same thing with Twitter too.
Sometimes they'll have it on there. Yep.
Yep.
Very good way to look for contacts is pulling up the social media, because sometimes they've left the contact in there.
Yep.
Because contact pages, we all know those don't.
Don't even
Use-
fucking go there.
I just found
Yeah.
a email that we've been looking for
That
by
you and I have
using
been
this
looking for?
method.
That you and I have been looking for, Aaliyah?
Yes, sir.
Wow, and I didn't even think about it. Okay,
Oh.
back on track, Aaliyah. Back on track. What's next?
Back on track. What
Yeah.
is next is, let me close this email draft. This podcasts is next.
Ooh, I
Podcast
could
is
talk about
next.
this for hours.
So let's not talk about it for hours, because we have like 5 more things to talk about after.
Okay, half an hour then.
But yeah, are podcasts something that you guys utilize in your PR, and what do you think about that? That method?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So podcasts are one of the kind of core things that we focus on, websites, along with your podcast and your web TV and your print and all that nice stuff. There are podcasts about everything and anything. So that's a really great way to kind of not only get your traditional kind of interviews, but also kind of go that lifestyle route. There are also a lot of really big kind of podcast networks as well. So that kind of helps as well if you can figure out who kind of the editor of that podcast network or the person who's in charge of it, because that will save you a lot of pitching to individuals, because they can kind of help you out on that end. And things like iHeart,
That
they
was a
have an
light bulb
entire
moment for me, Natasha. I didn't even think about that. I usually go one-on-one. Thank you. Thank you.
No worries. I mean, listen, it's not all of them unfortunately have that, but we're
No,
talking
but
about a
there's a
podcast.
few. There's a
There's
few,
a
though.
few, yeah. There's a one that I recently got in touch with as well. So I'm just kind of working with them. It's called Sound Off. So they have a bit of a podcast network. They have Tobin Tonight, Dean Blundell. They have a bunch. So that one's really cool. Check that guy out. Then there's iHeartRadio. They have an entire podcast network. CBC has a podcast network. A lot of campus radio stations have podcast networks as well, or podcast
My
listed.
God, I didn't even think about half these things. You are like feeding me here.
Good. I'm happy that I could help. But definitely 100%. And podcasts are also a little bit easier, I feel like, to set up for the artist, because usually they can be done via phone as well. So if an artist is on the road, that helps. And there are a lot of, kind of old radio guys that are no longer in the radio world who have podcasts, like Podcast, Todd Hancock. He's fantastic. Jason Rockman has his Rockman Power Hour. So there's a lot of really big people that do have podcasts, and there's a lot of small ones. And then there's the in between that are really fun, and anything. You can find a topic about anything. Mean Girls, whatever you want, it's there.
I love Mean Girls. That's a
Yeah, me too.
classic.
There's
Such a good movie.
I'm trying to think, there's a podcast. I forget the name of it now, but basically on those types of movies. And I love that one. I haven't listened to it in a while, but I should probably find out what it is.
If you find it, send it to me so I can
I
check it out
will.
too.
I will 100%.
I got one last thing I want to go over on podcasts too, just for everybody. Another thing, when you're trying to find podcast information, another pro tip on that is to also look on YouTube for that podcast, because a lot of them cross-pollinate. And if you don't find the contact in, forget the name of it. If you can't find the contact, go to YouTube. Sometimes you can find stuff there. And again, Instagram, you can sometimes find the contact. Just had to get that commercial.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do find podcasts sometimes can be a little tricky, because they'll be on Apple or, the Spotify or the Mixcloud, which doesn't have an email. So there are plenty of podcasts I've tried to find the contact, and I can't find it anywhere. It's unfortunate, but yeah, social's good tool. Usually you'll find something.
Excellent, excellent. Moving on, I'm going to do this nebulous topic, and it kind of has a few different platforms within it, but influencers in general.
Mm.
You got your Twitch, you got your Instagram, TikTok.
Well, wait, Twitch is a whole separate category though, isn't it? Not just influencers. I mean, is it both?
It's kind of crossover in my mind, but
I guess. I don't know. Maybe.
Is Twitch something that you guys tap into in your experience, Natasha?
Depending on the project, I feel like I haven't been able to go in depth down the Twitch hole in terms of what's there, but I do know Twitch can be a really cool way to kind of really engage with your audience, right? I feel like this is something that a lot of artists don't think of, is that your fans are number one. Like, if you're trying to kind of make a name for yourself, I say number one, focus on your fans instead of starting out of the gate to, hire, a bunch of promo, which is great. Like, I don't want to put myself out of a job here, but I do feel like focus on your fans, build that fan base, because that's going to help you everywhere down the road. And one of the ways to do that is Twitch, because there you can really engage with them. You can talk to them directly. You can make them, make the fans feel like you want to hear from them, which is a really big thing, because the more people you engage that way, the more they tell their friends, the more they tell their family. And still the best form of marketing, I believe, is word of mouth.
100%.
And Twitch is a great platform to do that with, is to really connect their fan base. But beyond that as well, is a lot of journalists or a lot of writers also do Twitch. So for example, I know Daniel DK, Knotfest, he also does Banger TV. He has a Twitch channel, which he has guests on. I think it's Herman Lee as well. He has a Twitch channel, which he live streams playing guitar, which he's had other artists on as guests. And so you can really utilize that on the press end as well, because there are journalists that do that on top of it. So it's a great platform all around to get started on your own and to get coverage.
The one thing I
That's
hate
a good
about Twitch, though, the one thing I hate about Twitch is like you cannot prove that you got them coverage unless they have
Oh,
the
I know,
link.
unless they have it checked off,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
annoying because there's no
yeah,
link. There's no,
yeah.
yeah.
I hate that part. But otherwise, it's good because we've gotten plenty of coverage on Twitch, and then later it's like we can't prove it, but it happened. So
It happened.
yeah,
Like I've seen artists do some cool things. Like I think it was Grayscale a couple of years ago did a hockey watch party on Twitch, which was really interesting.
oh,
There's
that's
there's a bunch of different things you can do with the platform. You could do watch parties like I just mentioned, or jam along, doing covers. There's so many different things you can do with that platform to really
Yeah.
engage people.
And it's not really something that PRs can pitch for, but there are a lot of channels that do like music video reactions. And that's really something that has to be recommended by their fans. But yeah, it's something that you can think of. I know Vicky Sarakis, she does video reactions, and you can go in there and you can even pay money to bump your video to the top and, hear them.
Chris Franzak does that too, just so you know, if you ever want to do it with Shield.
There you go. Chris Franzak, I'm sure he would love symphonic metal.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yes.
I would pay to watch that video. I'm just saying.
Oh man, he'd be like, "This is so boring."
Yeah, I would pay to watch that video. Anyways,
I feel like
where's
that's
the breakdown?
Agreed. I feel like that's a disclaimer for bands, though. If you do that, be prepared for a bad one that you might not like.
Yeah, if they're not into your genre, just be aware.
Yeah, I mean, I've had before where we were pitching for YouTube reviews, not Twitch. It's a little bit kind of on topic, but off topic. Yeah, we were really worried that they might get a bad review. And see, that usually comes back on the publicist because you pitched it, So it can be a bit of a disclaimer for everybody. If you are doing that, just be prepared. They might not like it.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're really honest on Twitch. So.
Yeah, exactly. So just be aware of that, and if you are pitching it and if you are spending money, that it doesn't mean you'll get a good one. It's still their opinion. So
yep,
it's a word of wisdom. Yep.
So
exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. Let's move into TikTok because I know we got a bit to say about TikTok. maybe we could
Let's
go
talk
over
about
TikTok
how you got 1 million views first, Aaliyah, because I know you like talking about this every single time.
every single time TikTok comes up.
I have to. I'm sorry.
It was just the right clip with the right
It's
part of the
awesome.
song, with the right
Yeah.
lighting on the singer that made everybody be like, OMG, that dress. OMG, this song. OMG, she looks like a Hex girl from Scooby-Doo. OMG.
You can now sell seminars
Like
on this,
so
Aaliyah,
many
with
things
that clip.
cross-pollinated. Like so many, the comments were like 5 different topics, but there was a lot of
A lot of discussion.
yes. And then of course the prompt in the video as well, which was like your first time hearing symphonic metal. So everybody's commenting their favorite symphonic metal bands,
Yep.
and then other people engaging who are also fans of those bands. And in the meantime, they're all fans of our genre that are hearing our music, and we gained so many fans from that. That's the story.
I just gotta say it. I'm sorry.
Genius.
I gotta figure out a way to whittle that down to two minutes, or like 30 seconds or something. 15 seconds in honor of TikTok.
There you go.
Natasha.
Yeah.
Let's talk about TikTok in general usage first, and then maybe we can talk about collaborating with influencers.
Mhm.
So what do you think are the best ways that bands can utilize TikTok on their own? And what are the most important things to remember?
Number one, I think, is searchability. So make sure you are one of the first results that come up when people type that in. So this is something that I just from some like tips and tricks videos that I found on YouTube. One of the things was to put your genre in your, like, not your handle, but you know how there's like a little name bio thing that you can update? Is to kind of put your genre in there. So when people are searching that type of music, you're going to be the first one of the first people that come up. But beyond that as well, I think, like, just in general, even if you're not a musician, I feel like consistency, number one, and when you're posting is what I mean by that. So, you know, if you work throughout the week, you want to post Monday to Friday, but then you want the weekends off, take the weekends off every week. Don't just then go and post on a Saturday. Like, make sure you're consistent on the same time, same day, because that does go a long way on TikTok with the algorithm. On top of that is, don't try. I know a lot of people, TikTok's very fast, so people put up a lot of videos, but I feel like go with your pace. Like, don't start out trying to do 3 TikToks a day. That's clearly too much. And if you can't keep that up, then that's just going to hurt your algorithm in the end anyway, because it's not consistent. So, you know, pick those, 3 days a week, and stick with those and try to upload every single day, the days you've chosen at those times. And I feel like that will really help because people begin to expect it. And it's kind of the same with Twitch as well. I feel like Twitch streamers try to, do same time every week, because it's a big thing. People come to expect that. So that's what they kind of keep following you for. And also it helps with the algorithm. Don't just post when you're about to release something. Keep it going.
Thank
Because
you
I
for
feel like
saying.
that's a big thing, and that's all platforms. Because there's a few reasons for this. Because if you stop posting altogether, it's going to ruin your algorithm, and you're starting from scratch when you do have to go release music again. So make sure you're keeping that going. And I feel like a big thing as well with TikTok specifically is, don't just necessarily post your music. I feel like, again, we kind of touched on this when we were talking before, just amongst us, but kind of marry that with other interests that might pique people, that might get people to watch. So your lifestyle interests, for example, maybe you really like hockey, you turn that into sort of something that you also do music and hockey. Maybe you really love, doing funny things, pair that with your TikTok, because people are going to be more interested because they want to hear about you on top of the music as well. They want to learn about who you are. They want to be brought into your world. And that's why they want to follow you, right? Because they connected to something on that end. So I feel like that kind of helps. And also I know a lot of artists don't want to do the trends, but I feel like try to marry the trends as authentic to you as possible, and try to do them once in a while. I'm not talking, do them all the time and only the trends, but try to hop on the ones that make sense, and do them most authentic to you, because that's going to help as well, kind of bring you at the top of any kind of searches and things like that. So yeah, don't discount them. I know people kind of scoff at the TikTok trends, but there's a reason that they do go viral, because that's what people are interested in. So try to marry both your music and the trends in your lifestyle together. when you're creating content.
So you were mentioning before, you have a success story with Braden King.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask, like, what were the kind of ingredients that went into that success?
Yeah, so part of it, I mean, this part I can't take credit for, but Braden is incredibly tall. I know this seems like a weird statement, but he is 6'9". So
That's really tall.
he is very
Did
tall. So
you say the right height? 6'9"?
6'9". He's 6'9". We're branding him as Canada's tallest country singer,
There's no
which has
doubt
helped us.
that's the case. Jesus. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of helped us a little bit on TikTok as well. So kind of keeping that as a common thread and some really fun content we have coming up. I've got him like standing next to really funny things when he's on tour that are really short, and then showing him next to some really tall stuff. It kind of is just a little bit of a play on that. But some of the things that we were able to kind of do is kind of playing on the fact that he's really tall and really putting him in sort of the same context as like other country music stars like Luke Combs and Dallas Smith and all those kinds of artists, and having him do like sort of his own playlist on the platform. Like, oh, if you really like this band, you like this band, you like this band, you're gonna like us. I feel like a lot of it is sort of framing yourself and also kind of getting yourself in front of those audiences as well. Kind of trying to bridge that. Um, and we've also focused on sort of where he's from, a video that did really well. I think it got over 40,000 in like less than a couple hours. He's from Saskatchewan, so we did this funny video where it was just like really weird random facts that people wouldn't know about Saskatchewan. And it took off as well. So kind of tapping into that kind of more fun-based stuff on top of the music and kind of using those things that make you unique and really highlighting them on the platform. So for Braden, he's tall and he loves country music. And he does a lot of really fun covers. And for, another band, it might be that they really love Converse sneakers and they want to shout that off to the world or something, and that they pair that with their TikTok content. Because there's a common thread there, right? That kind of brings it all together.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to say it because I think it's helpful to identify it for what it is. Sometimes it's about tapping into the consumerism that
Exactly.
kind of is such a big part of the internet. People want to be able to buy a thing or, really just buy a thing to make them connected to the artists that they like and stuff like that. So, yeah, finding a thing like a brand like Converse or like connecting to a movie franchise or a game or something like that. These are things that kind of play into that consumerism. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly kind of, I've been saying it as lifestyle, but the way you're seeing it is way better. You're correct. Yeah, I think like bridging it with that consumerism is exactly, I feel like, the way to go about it. And it kind of helps with that formulaic kind ofness of TikTok as well, right? And I think I've read somewhere, I want to say it was like a year or two ago, but I think it's like 70% of TikTok users have bought something from the platform. It's like the highest conversion rate platform. So if you are looking to sell merch, if you really like Converse, try to get yourself on some Converse and make some fun videos out of it and sell them.
Nice, good idea. So influencers on TikTok, is this something that you've played around with at all or know anything about?
Yeah. So I've worked with that. So when I first started kind of working on that end, it was a little bit more like the Wild West because I was reaching out to people individually. And you get some influencers who have 2,000 followers that were like, yeah, sure, well, I'll charge you $50 to do it. And then you'd get influencers who have 1,000 that are like, oh, it's going to cost $2,000. Like there was no in between. There was no way to gauge it, and trying to get their attention to use the videos was a bit of a task. But what I've found that might help for artists is to look for the TikTok management agencies and get in touch with them because all of those TikTokers are on their roster. So then you can go to them and say, hey, this is the campaign I want to do. This is how much I have. This is the kind of music. And then usually that management agency will work with you. Like, okay, here are the influencers this is how much they cost. Here are the ones that we think fit with your kind of music. So that's actually something that I found really helps. And it saves a lot of time because going at it individually is quite a task, and you never know what you're going to get back or even if you get responses. But I think another really important thing with going for TikTok influencers is to find someone who has a commonality with you. Again, like what we were just talking about, like maybe it's that person really loves, Barbie. You really love Barbie. Your music's about Barbie. That's a good influencer to hit up, right? Because a lot of things make sense if they're an influencer that you're a metal band, the influencer you see really loves metal. I feel like that's somebody to hit up. Like, don't try and, pitch somebody who only dances to pop music on something heavy. I feel like that's a big thing because usually they won't cover it unless they're getting paid a lot of money. I feel like there's a price for everything, but also you want to get in front of the right audience. So I feel like that's
100%, yeah.
the main thing. Yeah.
What do you mean these, like, is this like trade secret? Like, what are you talking about when you talk about these TikTok management agencies? Is this like a trade secret?
No. So there are a few. So there's one I like to use a lot. They're called, they're through Motion. They're actually based mainly out of Montreal. But they have a TikTok leg of their company called Henry, which they manage different TikTok artists. They have quite a big roster. There are a few more as well. If you I'm trying to think of the other ones, like there's Margot at the agency. She does really good work. And there's a few different ones. If you Google kind of different influencer agencies, usually those will come up. And I've had conversations with quite a few of them. I mean, I haven't worked on that end in a few months now, but just because I haven't had the right project. Because influencers are one thing I'll touch on is they are expensive. And that's something you definitely have to consider when doing that, because again, like the influencers that do have, say, 1 million followers, especially if you're going through these agencies, are probably going to quote you at least 1,000 or more. So that's something that you definitely have to consider. But yeah, Google the agencies and kind of look at that, get in contact with them. And then anytime you have a project, you can reach out to them and be like, hey, this is what I have. Do you have anyone that makes sense? And usually they do, because usually they have quite a big roster. And they work with kind of music from all labels. They work with, people of all different backgrounds and it's Instagram influencers as well and all that kind of stuff. So you'll find them kind of all in the same place.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, we're kind of over time already, but let's move on and wrap things up with this final topic that you suggested is a really good idea to talk about this. And we're talking internet radio stations, and why are these like something, and I don't even know how to frame this question apparently, but it's kind of something that I think it does get looked over a lot. So what do you think is important? Why is this valuable? How can people utilize this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I know a lot of the time when artists are trying to book shows, a lot of the time what comes up is usually radio play. And as we know, sort of, especially in Canada specifically, radio is a very narrow type market. There's only a few sounds that they deal with, and that's it. Especially more so in Canada, like in the US, for example, Motionless in White, I think, had #1 charting song at Active Rock this past year. In Canada, that would never happen. There's not a radio station in Canada that would play heavy music on that end. So that's just a big difference, especially here. But a way to kind of help get around that, I mean, you won't get on the radio charts by any means, but a way to kind of get that radio play. There are a lot of internet radio stations that cover all genres. There are ones that cover metal specifically. I think there's Give Me Radio. They do a lot of different interviews with like Metal Blade and like that kind of stuff. And they also do a lot of metal. There's Hard Rock Nights with Brian Basher. There's Loaded Radio with Scott Penfold. That's an internet radio station as well. And then, of course, the biggest one I think that I work with a lot of the time, which is Adobe Radio, who are actually based out of the US, but they all play radio. They do the same kind of thing as a normal radio station, but they do cover the underserved genres. That's kind of an extra way to get the coverage. And usually they will as well promote shows on air and any kind of ticket giveaways and that kind of stuff. So it's just another element of getting your music out there and get it broadcasted. Otherwise, the commercial radio stations only work with specific sounds, and they're extremely competitive. So that's just, it's just kind of an extra coverage. You can get your song added and into a rotation in front of those specific fans that like those genres as well. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's all I have. Curtis, did I forget anything? Natasha, did I forget anything?
But I'm guessing you're probably needing to eat or something, so I'm going to refrain for now.
All right. Are you like, I do have some time if you want to ask anything.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got one last question. Okay,
Yeah.
this is one last question. Well, one last kind of collaborative type of question, I guess is what it is, since it's going to involve the both of you guys. Okay, I'm going to go with Natasha first, since you're the guest of the evening.
Don't put air quotes around that. She is the guest.
Well, we're all guests. We're all answering the questions. So
I'm
it's
an
kind of
honorary member of the team. No, I'm
yeah,
just
she's
kidding.
an honorary member of the team
That's true.
tonight.
Fair.
That's what it is. So,
No, I'm kidding.
okay. So let's say that a band is coming to you to get PR. Well, I know you work for a company, so they wouldn't be coming to you directly, but you know what I mean. So
Mhm.
you're about to start a campaign, and they want to go outside of the traditional route with reviews and stuff like that. They're not sure where they want to go, what they want to do. They just want to get maximum coverage. Let's say they are an alternative band, since you said they're easiest to get coverage in Canada. So they're an alternative rock band. Which one of the channels are you going to start hitting up first to get the maximum coverage? Which one are you going to go after? YouTube, podcasts, TikTok, Instagram? What are you going to go after if they do that to you?
Right. So the first and foremost is usually podcasts and
Okay.
YouTube. I kind of do those in tandem because I find a lot of the people who do the YouTube also do, a lot of people who have podcasts also put them on YouTube. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So those I kind of start looking through the different podcast networks and I start going through my database. Okay, what lifestyle, what kind of podcast can I pair this musician up with? Which usually when I'm collecting assets from the band, along with the music and the bio, I'll give them a lifestyle questionnaire. So I have that information of what kind of things they're interested in and that kind of stuff that we can go beyond that. And as well as sort of who is the best kind of talkative person and stuff like that for those kinds of interviews. So usually I'll go through those first. And then from there, the TikTok end, it really depends on sort of their campaign. Like, does it make sense? Like, if they're into something like, I don't know, I'm trying to think. It really depends on what they're interested in. So, for example, we have like the gaming thing that I brought up earlier. Like, that artist is a huge gamer and they play a lot of Final Fantasy. They have high scores, they have stuff like that. So that's an easy one that I can go to those podcasts for because he is really interested in it. If it's someone who's lukewarm on something, like, yeah, sure, they like fashion. I mean, I can't really, there's not much there I can pitch a fashion publication on to convince them if they just like it. You know what I mean?
I get it.
So it really depends on the artist and it really depends on the comfortability. Sometimes if we're talking about doing Instagram lives and stuff like that, that's number one as well, to find out if they are okay with doing that kind of stuff, because sometimes they're not. Because the worst thing is to get someone on an Instagram live with, say, a big influencer and it's awkward. You know what I mean? So they have to
I've
be
never had that
comfortable with
happen. Never had that happen with
really.
a client. Never. I'm joking. Of course.
Okay, I was
Of
gonna
course.
say
Of
it happens a
course.
lot.
Of course.
Yeah,
Of
so
course.
stuff like that, you have to just make sure that it makes sense for the artist.
Yep.
And they have to have something that they really like. Like, it can't just be like, yeah, sure, I like that. It's got to be like you are in it, because you have to be able to really talk about this subject. So yeah, that's the first step, is going after the podcasts and YouTubers.
I love it. So I wanted to ask a band member this question, since it pertains. So Aaliyah, as a band member, so Natasha's your publicist now. I've been fired, and you've left C Squared apparently, and you're now with Natasha. So what would you, as a band member, be wanting your PR to be doing to get you into different places other than just reviews, if that makes sense? What would be your questions? What would you say to them? Like, I'm
Your
asking you as a
question
band
is
member.
like not a question.
Well, I'm trying to find, okay, like, I'm just trying to say, like, okay, so you get a publicist, like,
What
your
are my
band,
questions to the
like,
publicist?
what are you going to ask them to do to get
Give me
into
as
different
much coverage as
spots?
possible.
No, I know, but what are you aiming for is what I'm saying. You want the podcast, you want the YouTubes, what do you want here?
Yeah, I would
Like,
be open.
what do you as a band member want when these types
I'm
of
too
things?
laid back of a person to ask this question to. I'd be like, anything. I'm down for whatever. Like, you do a podcast interview, I'll do a YouTube interview, I'll do a Twitch interview, like,
What
whatever.
would you want to do the most out of all these different things? So Natasha's now your publicist. What is she aiming for you?
This is a pointless question. Like, really,
I'm
I'm
asking
sorry,
what the
Curtis,
band wants
but
it.
like honestly, I'm like
Fine.
anything is good with
Fine.
me.
You're no good on this one. Then never
I'm
mind.
not the right person to ask. I'm not
Fine.
particular. I know some people prefer written interviews, like our vocalist prefers written interviews. For me, I'm open-minded and like to do whatever I want. But that is something that bands should communicate to their PR if they have a preference. And they really don't like talking, like speaking to strangers, for example. If you're like a really, really extreme introvert and you prefer to think out your words really well and do written interviews, then that's something you should probably let your publicist know ahead of time.
Would
Absolutely,
you
because sorry, you go ahead.
go? Well, I was just gonna say, would you as a band member be okay with Natasha pitching like the Lord of the Rings stuff? You're also interested in other things, like I know that you're interested in other genres of metal and stuff like that, and you also got your other hobbies that you do.
If she thought it was appropriate, then yeah. With the Lord of the Rings thing, I'm not so tapped into like the consumerist side of things. It's like, yeah, I like every other year we will have a marathon or something and we'll watch all the movies. And I like sharing Lord of the Rings memes, but I don't collect the figurines. I don't like have a bunch of different merch. I only have one copy of the extended versions of the
Sure.
Blu-ray. Like
Uh-huh.
it's like,
Sure.
so how much of a collector am I? How much of an obsessed person am I? I'm not sure how much I could help with that. Trivia I could do probably, but
Here's where I have a problem. And Natasha, I keep cutting you off. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I've had it where we've tried to pitch bands for some of these specialized interests, and they go like, "I just want to talk about the music."
I get that sometimes, and definitely again, like kind of you want to make sure the artist wants to do it because otherwise it can get a little awkward, especially if we're talking about doing live stuff on Twitch and whatnot. Like,
Yep.
it has to be good, but usually if it's someone who wants to focus on music specifically, usually I'll find something. Maybe it's gear related, maybe it's talking about instruments on that end. Sometimes that can help, or writing track by tracks and stuff like that, like those
I love
little things
those.
you
Yeah.
can do. Yeah, because it's hard. And I mean, again, like the lifestyle stuff like that is sort of more of if it makes sense for the artist. I mean, I try to always get that kind of stuff because there are some publications that have emailers based on that kind of stuff. So that's kind of easy stuff that we can kind of take. But if it's something where I'm pitching for like Instagram collabs and stuff like that's got to be a big interest because otherwise you can't convince the other person to do it for free anyway.
You
Because
said
they'll use
exactly what I wanted you to say. Thank you.
yeah, good. So sometimes I've had like people come back and they want thousands and thousands of dollars. So on that end, to convince them to do it for free, you got to be interested. You got to have something that they want to talk to you about. So it really depends on the artist.
Perfect. I think that's all I got, Aaliyah.
all right. Well, that's about all the time we have. So thank you again for coming on the podcast again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I mean, I always enjoy talking to you guys.
Well, I will have to have you
Great.
back.
Absolutely. So when you're in Chicago, correct?
Yeah.
If you're ever in Toronto, let me know. Curtis, I know
Okay.
you're in Cambridge, but if
If
next time
she
you're at
comes
a
to
show,
Toronto, she's visiting me before she visits you.
Yeah,
No,
it's a requirement,
sorry.
business requirement.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. But if you're ever in town for a show or anything like that, Curtis as well, like if you're ever in Toronto for a show, let me know. We should grab a drink or coffee or tea or go to the show or whatever. I'm so down.
I've hung out with
Awesome.
Natasha. She's good to hang out with.
I'm looking forward to it
I
in this
try. I'm super
potential
lame, but
future. All right,
I'm
awesome. And everyone listening, thank you for listening. And until next time, you know what to do. Make like a bull.
have a
Make like a bull and throw those horns up.